The bass from the speakers thumped against my ribs, a physical echo of the headache starting behind my eyes. I wanted to be anywhere but here, crammed into this sticky vinyl booth at the Lair, surrounded by my boyfriend Justin's laughing friends. But it was his finance department's end-of-semester blowout, and as the dutiful girlfriend of 6 months, I was expected to attend. Sophia, that was me. The reliable one. The good influence. Justin loved to say it with a teasing smile, but lately the label felt less like an endearment and more like a cage. The game of truth or dare had been circling the table like a shark for 20 minutes, growing progressively more drunk and bold. I'd managed to dodge it, sipping my soda water while Justin, arms slung possessively over my shoulders, regaled his buddy Mark with a story. Then the bottle landed on Lila. Lila was a sophomore, a new addition to Justin's study group. She had this wide-eyed, delicate beauty and a voice so soft you had to lean in to hear her. The guys loved it. She'd been casting shy, admiring glances at Justin all night, and a cold knot had been tightening in my stomach. "Dare," she chirped, flushing prettily. Mark, who was running the game, grinned. "Hey newbie. Let's start you off easy. See that guy over there?" He pointed vaguely at a group by the pool table. "Go get his number." Lila bit her lip, her gaze sweeping the table before landing with practiced innocence right on Justin. "Oh, that's too scary for my first one. Can I pick someone here? Someone safe?" A chorus of oaths went up. Justin's fingers drummed on my shoulder. "Fine," Mark said. "But it's gotta be good. I dare you to kiss the guy of your choice for 1 full minute. On the lips. No pecks." The air left my lungs. Lila's eyes lit up and she didn't even pretend to look elsewhere. "Justin," she said, her voice a breathy whisper. "Senior, would you mind?" The table erupted. Someone started a crude countdown. Justin turned to me, his expression a mask of amused helplessness. "Babe, it's just a game," he murmured as if that explained everything. As if it granted absolution. Before I could speak, what would I even say? "No, don't kiss another girl in front of me." He was sliding out of the booth. He gave me a wink. "Don't be a sore loser, sophomore." The words turned my blood to ice. Sore loser? As if my relationship was a contest he could casually forfeit a round of. He walked to where Lila stood, a blush staining her cheeks. He didn't hesitate. He took her face in his hands and kissed her. Not a quick, game-friendly smack. A real, lingering, minute-long kiss. The guys hooped and hollered. Mark timed it on his phone, shouting, 30 seconds. Look at him go. I sat frozen. The noise of the bar faded into a dull roar. All I could see was Justin's back, the way Lila's hands came up to rest lightly on his arms. The kiss ended to applause and whistles. Justin swaggered back to the booth, his cheeks flushed with laughter and something else. He dropped beside me and tried to pull me into a side hug. I stiffened. The spell broke. The cold knot in my stomach exploded into a white-hot fury. "We're done," I said. My voice sounded strange in my own ears, flat and final. Justin blinked, his smile not quite fading. "What?" I said. "We're done. We're over." I started gathering my purse, my jacket. My hands were trembling, but my movements were precise. He laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. "Sophia, come on. Don't be like that. It was a dare." It didn't mean anything. "It meant something to me," I said, looking directly at him for the first time since he'd sat back down. "You dismissed me. You called me a sore loser for having a basic boundary. You don't get to do that." His amusement finally evaporated, replaced by a flicker of irritation. "You're seriously blowing this up over a game? God, if you had to kiss some guy for a dare, I wouldn't care at all. It's not a big deal." There was the core of it. He assumed that because I was quiet, because I was good, my feelings were shallow, my boundaries flexible. He assumed my love was a placid lake, not a depth he could disturb. "Well, I do care," I said, standing up. The table had gone quiet, all eyes on us. "And my caring isn't up for debate. Goodbye, Justin." I turned to leave. Humiliation and grief warred with the sheer, clean energy of my anger. I'd just taken 2 steps when Mark's voice cut through the tension. "Whoa, okay. Moving on. Bottles spinning. And, oh, this is perfect. Carter. Your turn, man. You've been too quiet." I knew Carter Reed. Everyone did. He was a legend in the finance department, not just for being top of the class, but for his detached, almost unnerving calm. He was handsome in a sharp, unapproachable way, and he had a reputation for keeping everyone, especially women, at a glacial distance. He was Justin's friend, sort of in the way ambitious people network. He'd been sitting in the shadowy corner of the booth all night, observing the chaos with an unreadable expression. Now he looked at the bottle pointing at him and then at Mark. "Dare," he said. His voice was low, a quiet rumble that somehow silenced the residual chatter. Mark's grin turned wicked. He pulled a card from the hardcore pile they'd brought. "Oh man. This is the big one. Eh, Carter? The dare is, take a girl home with you tonight. And I mean home. The whole night." A collective gasp, then laughter. Someone muttered, "Good luck with that. Dude's basically a monk." Carter didn't react. He took a slow sip of his drink, his gaze scanning the room. Felt like time slowed down. His eyes passed over the giggling girls, over a smirking Lila, over a still fuming Justin, and landed on me. I was standing there, purse in hand, halfway to an exit, my heart a raw, exposed nerve. He set his glass down, pushed himself to his feet with a fluid, unhurried motion. The room watched, mesmerized, as he walked the few steps to stand in front of me. He was taller than I remembered up close. He didn't smile. But his eyes, a cool, analytical gray, held mine. He extended a hand, palm up. His voice was still quiet, but it carried in the stunned silence. "Sophia," he said. "Want to get out of here?" It was insanity. It was a rebound dressed up as a nuclear option. It was everything good Sophia would never ever do. I saw Justin's face go from angry to incredulous. I saw the shock on everyone else's. I felt the weight of my own shattered expectations. And in that moment, the rebellion that had been simmering for months boiled over. The goody two-shoes was done playing by rules that only left her hurting. I looked at Carter's steady hand. I looked at Justin's sneering disbelief. I thought, what do I have to lose? My fingers slid into Carter's. His hand was warm, his grip firm. "Yes," I said clear and loud. "Let's go." The uproar behind us was immediate. I heard Justin's voice, sharp and commanding. "Carter, what the hell? She's upset, she doesn't know what she's doing." Carter didn't even glance back. He simply tightened his hold on my hand and led me through the crowd toward the door. As we passed the booth, Justin stood up, blocking our path slightly. He looked at me, his expression a mix of fury and a weird, patronizing concern. "Sophia, stop this. You're embarrassing yourself. Come sit down, we'll talk." I met his eyes. The hurt was still there, a deep ache, but it was buried under layers of icy resolve. "We have nothing to talk about, Justin. We broke up. Remember?" He turned to Carter, forcing a laugh. "Dude, come on. You know how she is. She's not going to go through with this. She's just trying to piss me off." Carter finally acknowledged him. He gave Justin a look so devoid of warmth it could have frozen the beer in his hand. "Is that right?" he said, his tone flat. "Yeah," Justin scoffed, gaining confidence. "Look, just humor her. Walk her out, then send her back. I'll owe you one." That did it. The final shred of any lingering sentiment dissolved. Before Carter could reply, I spoke up, smiling a bright, brittle smile directly at my ex-boyfriend. "Wow, Justin. Still trying to manage your ex's social calendar? That's pretty pathetic." I leaned into Carter's side, a gesture I hoped looked far more natural than it felt. "Don't worry about us. And for God's sake, don't wait up." I pulled Carter forward, and this time Justin didn't move to stop us. The last thing I heard as the heavy door of the lair swung shut behind us was Mark's stunned whisper. "Holy shit. Carter Reed just left with a girl." The cool night air hit my face like a slap. The bravado that had carried me out the door evaporated, leaving me shaky and suddenly, terribly aware of the man whose hand I was still clutching. I pulled mine away, wrapping my arms around myself. "Thank you for the assist back there. You can just drop me at the subway station on 5th. Carter stopped beside a sleek black car. He clicked the keys and the lights flashed. He turned to look at me, his face half in shadow from a street lamp. "Get in," he said, not unkindly, but with a finality that brooked no argument. A new kind of panic, colder and sharper, set in. What had I just done? I'd agreed to a dare that explicitly involved spending the night with Carter Reed, a virtual stranger with a reputation for icy detachment. "Really, it's okay," I stammered. "I don't expect you to actually." The dare. He opened the passenger door. Sophia. Get in the car. The way he said my name, not a question, not a plea, just a simple statement, undid me. Numbly I slid into the leather seat. The interior smelled like clean linen and something faintly spicy. It was immaculate. He got in beside me, started the engine and pulled smoothly into the empty street. We drove in silence for several blocks. I stared out the window, watching the neon blur of the city, my mind a whirlwind of regret, fear and a stubborn, defiant pride. I'd stood up for myself. I'd walked away. That had to count for something, even if my grand exit had landed me in a car with the campus enigma. Then I remembered the vow. At the start of the game, Mark had made everyone swear an oath. Anyone who lies or chickens out on a dare will be cursed with a lifetime of bad luck, debt and financial ruin. We'd all laughed and agreed, a silly superstition to make the game spicier. I'd never believed in that stuff. Till now. Until my life had just imploded and the only thing I had left to cling to was my integrity and maybe, just maybe, my future financial stability. A sick joke, but my traitorous mind latched onto it. If I don't actually spend the night somewhere with him, if I go home to my dorm, is that chickening out? Is that a lie? The thought was ridiculous, but it rooted itself in my panic. My parents had struggled for years. The fear of scarcity, of failure, was bone deep. It was part of why I was the good one. Good grades, good behavior, a safe, reliable path. Carter pulled up to the bright entrance of the 5th Street subway. He put the car in park and finally looked at me. This is you. His voice was neutral. He was giving me an out. A gentlemanly, if cold, end to a bizarre charade. It's only a lifetime of poverty. No big deal, his demeanor seemed to say. But to me, in that moment, it felt like a very big deal. It felt like tempting fate when my fate already felt incredibly fragile. As his hand moved to unlock the doors, I acted purely on instinct. I reached over and pressed my hand down on top of his, stopping him. He went very still. He turned his head slowly, his gray eyes sharpening as they focused on my face. The interior light was dim, but I could see the question in them. What does this mean? He asked, his voice dropping even lower. My mind was a frantic, tangled mess. I couldn't say the real reason. I'm scared of a stupid curse. That sounded insane. So my mouth, operating on its own, blurted out the only other coherent, if utterly mortifying, thought it could form. I want to go through with it. With you. The dare. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of silence that had weight and texture. Carter's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. A shudder coming down. He leaned back slowly into his seat, extracting his hand from under mine. He looked straight ahead through the windshield. But I don't, he said flatly. The 3 words hung in the air, a guillotine blade dropping on my last shred of dignity. The ice in his voice was no longer just detachment. It was active rejection. The awkwardness was so profound it felt physical, a thick, suffocating blanket smothering the car. I wanted to melt into the leather seats and disappear. I'd just been publicly dumped, then I'd propositioned a man who found the idea distasteful. My life was a comedy of errors written by a particularly cruel playwright. I'm sorry, I whispered, the words barely audible. My face was on fire. I'm so sorry. I've had too much to drink. I didn't mean. I wasn't trying to. I fumbled for the door handle myself, desperate to escape. I'll just go. Thank you. For everything. The doors locked. The sound was soft but definitive in the quiet car. Carter started the engine again and pulled away from the curb, merging back into traffic without a word. I stared at him, bewildered. His profile was stern, carved from marble in the passing streetlights. He looked angrier than before. Why? Because I'd offended him? Because I'd tried to back out, then clumsily come on to him and now was trying to flee? I was a chaotic mess and Carter Reed valued control above all else. I was probably giving him hives. Trying to salvage any last bit of my tattered self-respect, I stammered into the renewed silence. Senior, Carter, I'm really sorry. I swear I have no intentions toward you. No, I don't even like you like that. You're handsome, but you're not my type at all. You're perfectly safe. I promise. I thought clarifying my lack of attraction might smooth things over. Instead, the atmosphere in the car seemed to drop another 10 degrees. I saw his jaw tighten. The car's speed increased slightly. Why was he getting more angry? We drove in that terrible frozen silence for another 10 minutes, leaving the bustling downtown for a quieter, more upscale neighborhood of brownstones and boutique galleries. He finally pulled over in front of an unmarked speakeasy-style bar, its entrance marked only by a single glowing violet light. He turned off the engine and looked at me. His expression was unreadable again, the anger banked to cool embers. "We made a promise to spend the night," he stated, as if explaining something simple to a child. "It doesn't have to mean what they implied. But we should honor the spirit of the dare." He got out of the car. After a stunned second, I followed. He knew the owner. With a nod to the woman at the velvet rope, we were ushered inside and to a secluded plush booth in the back. The air was filled with the soft clink of glasses and the murmur of low conversation, a world away from the raucous energy of the lair. "Wait here," he said, and then he was gone, disappearing toward a back hallway, presumably to speak to the owner. Alone, the reality of the night crashed down on me again. My phone, which had been on silent, buzzed incessantly in my purse. I pulled it out. Unknown number. With a sinking feeling, I answered. I didn't say anything, but I didn't need to. I could hear the background noise of a bar, a different one, and then Lila's sweet, concerned voice. "Justin, aren't you going to call Sophia? Aren't you worried about her? What if she's with Carter for real?" Justin's laugh was relaxed, confident. It pierced me through the phone line. "Lila, come on. You know Sophia. She's the most straight-laced person I know. She was just throwing a fit. She's probably already back in her dorm, crying into her pillow. She'll call me tomorrow full of apologies." "You seem so sure," Lila purred. "It's like you don't even care that much." Pause. Then Justin's voice, quieter but clear as day. "It's not like I'm that into her." He was convenient. Stable. The words were a physical blow. Convenient. Stable. The final demolition of the relationship I'd thought we had. Humiliation burned through me, hotter and more toxic than the anger from before. Because he was right. I had been planning to go back to my dorm. To cry. To maybe even apologize tomorrow, to smooth things over, to be the good, understanding girlfriend. He knew me better than I knew myself. A hot, nameless fury erupted in my chest, incinerating the humiliation. I ended the call and slammed the phone down on the velvet seat just as a waiter approached with a cocktail. Something frothy and pink with a violet orchid garnish. I hadn't ordered it. Carter must have. I grabbed it and took a long, desperate gulp, hoping the alcohol would douse the fire inside me. It was sweet and strong with a complex, herbal aftertaste. The waiter, a young man with anxious eyes, looked startled. "Miss, I was just bringing that over. I need to." "It's fine," I snapped, cutting him off, taking another swallow. "Put it on my tab. Whatever it costs." "No, you don't understand. That's not from the menu. That's the owner's personal." He looked truly panicked now. He dithered for a second, then threw his tray down on a nearby empty table and sprinted in the direction Carter had gone. A wave of exhaustion rolled through me, dulling the sharp edges of my emotions and leaving me unsteady and overwhelmed. "Sophia." His voice sounded far away but nice. "So nice." He leaned down, his cool hand pressing against my flushed cheek. "How are you feeling?" The touch was heaven. "So cool," I murmured, leaning my face into his palm like a cat chasing the relief. My 2.5% remaining brain cells screamed that this was a bad idea, that this man had just rejected me spectacularly. With immense effort, I pushed his hand away. I needed to get out. I slid clumsily out of the booth, my legs feeling like overcooked noodles. "Where are you going?" Carter's voice was closer now, a frown in it. He caught my arm, his grip firm. I turned to look at him. He was so handsome, all sharp angles and concerned gray eyes. The situation felt overwhelming, my thoughts tangled and difficult to sort through. I tried to form a coherent sentence. "I think I need to make a bad decision," I said honestly, the words slurring slightly. His frown deepened into a scowl. I hastened to reassure him. "But not you. Don't worry. It won't be you." It seemed important that he know I wouldn't impose on him, wouldn't be a further burden. "I'll find someone else. Anyone else." I tried to sound earnest, responsible even in my chemically induced state. "I promise. You're safe." Carter's face darkened. His expression became utterly unreadable, a mask of pure stone. He released my arm as if it had burned him. "Is that so?" he said, his voice dangerously quiet. He looked down at me and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something hot and fierce in those cool gray eyes. It was gone in an instant. "Sophia," he said, each word dripping with icy finality. "I hope you keep your word." Then he turned and walked away, leaving me swaying alone in the middle of the quiet, elegant bar. For a moment I just stood there, the soft jazz music and the low hum of conversation feeling like they were coming from the end of a long tunnel. The warmth inside me had morphed into a relentless, throbbing heat, a tropical fever in my veins. Carter was walking away, a dark, receding figure moving toward the bar's entrance. He was leaving. He'd taken me at my word, my stupid, drunken, defiant word, and he was abandoning me to my fate. A spike of pure panic, sharp and sobering, cut through the haze. Find someone else. Anyone else. The idea, which had seemed so logical and considerate a minute ago, now felt horrifying. I was in a strange bar in a strange part of town, my judgment obliterated by a spiked drink, and I'd just told my only semi-familiar connection to get lost. Wait. The word tore from my throat raw and too loud. A few patrons glanced over. Carter stopped. He didn't turn around, but he paused, his broad shoulders tense under his dark shirt. I stumbled forward, my heels catching on the plush carpet. I reached him just as he began to turn. I clutched at his sleeve, the fabric soft and expensive under my trembling fingers. Don't leave me here." He looked down at my hand on his arm, then slowly up to my face. His expression was still cold, but the absolute indifference from before was gone. It was replaced by something harder to read. Annoyance certainly, but also a calculating assessment. He was seeing the dilated pupils, the flushed skin, the sheer, undisguised need for an anchor. "You said anyone but me," he stated, his voice flat. "I was wrong," I whispered, the admission costing me what little pride I had left. "Please." A long, silent beat passed. The bartender watched us with open curiosity. Finally, Carter let out a short, exasperated breath. He didn't take my hand, but he didn't shake me off either. "Can you walk?" I nodded, though the room tipped slightly. He turned and headed for the door, and I followed, a baby duck imprinting on the first thing it saw. The cool night air outside was another shock to the system, a brief relief that did nothing to douse the internal fire. He didn't speak as he unlocked the car and helped me in. His touch was impersonal, efficient. The drive that followed was a blur of streetlights and a silent, seething tension that filled the car more completely than any conversation could have. I curled into the passenger seat, pressing my forehead against the cool window, trying to focus on the passing lines of the road, to anchor myself to something solid. We didn't go far. He pulled into the underground garage of a modern, sleek apartment building. The security was tight, a wave of a key fob, a silent elevator ride to a high floor. His apartment was exactly what I would have predicted. Minimalist, obsessively clean, all cool grays, whites and blacks. It looked like a showroom devoid of personal touches. It smelled like him, that clean linen and spice scent. The door clicked shut behind us and the finality of the sound made me jump. I stood awkwardly in the entryway, hugging myself, while Carter shrugged off his jacket and tossed it over the back of a pristine white sofa. He moved to the kitchen, a galley-style space separated by a marble countertop, and poured a glass of water from a filter pitcher. He came back and held it out to me. "Drink this." I took it, my fingers brushing his. A small electric jolt went through me and I almost dropped the glass. I drank greedily, the water doing nothing to quench the deeper thirst. "Sit," he commanded, nodding toward the sofa. I obeyed, perching on the very edge, the glass clutched in both hands. Carter didn't sit. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching me. The distance between us felt like a mile. The bartender said the drink was much stronger than expected. "You're overwhelmed, but you're safe. How do you feel?" How did I feel? I felt like my skin was 2 sizes too small. I felt a restless, aching emptiness that was both physical and profoundly emotional. I felt seen and utterly exposed in the most vulnerable, humiliating way possible. "Hot," I managed to say. "And, not myself." He nodded once as if I'd confirmed a hypothesis. "The effects will pass. It's not dangerous, just intense." He pushed off from the counter and walked to a hallway. "The guest bathroom is there. There's an unopened toothbrush in the cabinet. You can take the guest room at the end of the hall. I'll be in here." He was giving me an escape route. A sterile, polite, and utterly lonely way to fulfill the technicality of the dare. We would be under the same roof until morning. That was it. But as he turned to walk away, something in me broke. The loneliness of that prospect. Sitting in a strange, cold room, wrestling with the ghosts of Justin's betrayal and my own stupidity, while the chemical storm raged in my body, was worse than any potential humiliation Carter could dish out. Carter. He stopped but didn't turn. The words came out in a rush, fueled by desperation and that damned persistent heat. You said we should honor the spirit of the dare. Spending the night in separate rooms. That feels like a lie too. Doesn't it? Now he turned, his expression unreadable. What are you suggesting, Sophia? I had no idea. My brain was offline. My body was making decisions. I set the water glass down on a coaster with a shaky hand and stood up. The room tilted and I took a step to steady myself. I don't know. Just, don't go. I saw the conflict in his eyes then. The rigid self-control warring with something else. He was a man who valued order above all, and I was chaos incarnate on his white rug. You're not in your right mind, he said, his voice tight. I know, I admitted, taking another step toward him. The space between us shrank. I could see the faint stubble along his jaw, the precise line of his lips. But neither were you when you asked me to leave with you. That was crazy too. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his mouth. That was strategy. This is survival. The word hung between us. Survival. It was melodramatic, but it felt true. Surviving the night. Surviving the aftermath of Justin. Surviving myself. He didn't move away as I closed the final step. I reached out, my hand hovering near his chest, not quite touching. You helped me before. When no one else did. Even when I was awful to you. Help me now. It was the wrong thing to say. Or maybe the right thing. His eyes darkened, the gray turning stormy. The controlled facade cracked, just for a second, revealing a glimpse of a much more turbulent man beneath. You have no idea what you're asking, he said, his voice a low rasp. Then show me. It was a dare. A challenge thrown into the tense silence of his perfect apartment. I saw the moment his control snapped. It wasn't dramatic. It was a subtle shift in his posture, a deepening of the intensity in his gaze, a slight flare of his nostrils. He moved so fast, stopped inches away from me, emotion heavy between us, neither of us stepping back. He kissed me. He pulled back just as abruptly, the intensity of the moment leaving me unsteady. He rested his forehead against mine, his breathing ragged. His eyes were closed. Still sure about this? He murmured, the words vibrating against my skin. In answer, I leaned into him, letting the moment speak for itself. I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I knew, the insistent buzz of my phone pulled me back to awareness. Carter stirred beside me, shifting slightly. Ignore it, he mumbled, his voice sleep-roughened. But it kept buzzing. Relentlessly. I knew who it was. With a sigh, I reluctantly extricated myself from his hold and slid out of bed, finding my phone in the pocket of my discarded jeans. The screen glowed with Justin's name. Before I could decide what to do, a long arm reached out from the bed. Carter took the phone from my hand. He answered it, putting it on speaker, and pulled me back down beside him, tucking me under his arm. Sophia? Where are you right now? Justin's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. Your roommate said you didn't come back to the dorm. Who are you with? Carter's lips brushed my temple. He answered, his voice lazy and saturated with a satisfaction that was both genuine and deliberately provocative. Calling at this hour, Justin? What's the matter? Still trying to interfere. The silence on the other end was volcanic. I buried my face in Carter's chest, a hysterical laugh bubbling in my throat. Carter. Justin's voice was deadly quiet when he finally spoke. You know how I feel about her. And you still touched her. You're no brother of mine. Carter didn't seem bothered at all. His touch lingered, unspoken tension hanging between us. We're not anymore, he agreed casually, as if discussing the weather. The finality in his voice sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. He'd just torched a friendship, publicly chosen a side, and he sounded utterly at peace with it. Justin was sputtering now, his calm facade gone. You son of a... Language, Carter drawled, cutting him off. He was enjoying this, that I felt the shift in his posture and the charged tension between us deepen. My breath hitched. He looked down at me, his eyes gleaming in the dark. We're a little busy here, Justin. Take care. He didn't wait for a reply. He ended the call and tossed my phone onto the nightstand. It clattered against the wood. Eventually, exhausted, we drifted into sleep side by side. This time, sleep pulled me under quickly and deeply, with Carter's arms locked firmly around me, as if he had no intention of ever letting go. I woke to pale morning light filtering through the blinds and an empty bed. The space beside me was cool, the sheets rumpled but vacant. A hollow feeling, immediate and acute, opened up in my chest. Of course. The logic of the night retreated, and the cold morning after logic took its place. It had been a dare. A one-night rebellion. He'd gotten what he needed. Honor had been satisfied, the dare fulfilled, and he'd probably enjoyed the novelty of it. Now it was over. I sat up, clutching the sheet to my chest, and looked around. His bedroom was as minimalist as the living room. A bed, 2 nightstands, a dresser. No photos, no clutter. Told me nothing about him. I found my clothes folded neatly on a chair by the door. Not how I'd left them. He must have done that after I fell asleep. The gesture was so considerate it made the hollow feeling ache worse. It was the kind of thing you did for a guest, not a lover. I dressed quickly, my movements silent. I used the guest bathroom, finding the promised new toothbrush. My reflection in the mirror was a shock. My hair was a wild mess, my reflection looked different. Tired, changed, marked by the intensity of the night. But my eyes, they looked different. Older. Less naive. There was no note. No message. Just the silent, pristine apartment. I let myself out, the door clicking shut with the same finality as last night. The elevator ride down felt infinitely longer. In the bright, sober light of the lobby, the events of the past 12 hours seemed like a surreal, erotic dream. My phone, now charged from a courtesy outlet I'd found, buzzed to life in my hand. Dozens of missed calls and texts, mostly from Justin and a few from bewildered friends who'd heard the wild rumors. I ignored them all. I had a more pressing mission. I needed to calculate my fortune. The silly superstition felt like the only solid ground I had. I'd spent the night with Carter. The dare was fulfilled. I had not lied. Therefore my financial future was secure. It was absurd, but clinging to that absurdity was the only thing keeping me from completely falling apart. I went back to my dorm, ignored my roommate's wide-eyed stare, crawled into my own bed and pulled the covers over my head. I spent the day in a haze of exhausted sleep and confused replaying of memories. Justin's betrayal, Carter's hands, Carter's mouth, Carter's voice in the dark, Carter's empty side of the bed. When I finally emerged that evening, showered and dressed in clean, soft clothes, I felt oddly calm. Numb but calm. I'd survived. I'd done the outrageous thing. The good girl was gone. I was not prepared to see Justin waiting for me outside my dorm building. He was leaning against the brick wall, looking tired but determined. When he saw me, he pushed off and walked over, his expression not angry but soft. Pleading. "Sophia," he said, his voice gentle. "Hey." I stopped, crossing my arms over my chest, a wall against him. "What do you want, Justin?" "I deleted all of Lila's contact info," he said quickly, as if offering a peace treaty. "I won't go to any study groups she's in. I'll keep my distance, I promise." He took a step closer. "Let's just pretend yesterday never happened. The breakup, the dare, all of it. We can go back to how we were." I stared at him, my mind struggling to process the sheer audacity. After everything, the kiss, the dismissal, the cruel words on the phone, he thought he could just reset. Because he was that confident in his hold over good, stable, convenient Sophia. The numbness cracked, replaced by a slow-burning anger. "How can we pretend it never happened, Justin? It did happen. You happened. I happened." He smiled then, a relaxed, familiar smile. He reached out as if to touch my hair and I flinched back. His smile didn't falter. "Come on, sophomore. I know you. I know nothing really happened with Carter last night. You were just trying to teach me a lesson. It worked okay? I learned it." My blood ran cold. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because he's Carter," Justin said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "And you. He doesn't do messy. And you don't do that. Not for real. You two probably just sat in a bar all night talking about stock portfolios." He chuckled, the sound grating. "But you had me going for a minute there. I was running all over looking for you. So we're even now, right?" The condescension was a physical slap. He was so sure of his narrative of the little boxes he'd put us in. He'd convinced himself of a truth that let him off the hook completely. My anger solidified into something cold and sharp. I pushed past him. I told you we're broken up. Stop bothering me. Sophia, be reasonable. I whirled on him. You be reasonable. You think you can dissect my life, decide what I did or didn't do and then just pick up where you left off? Stay away from me, Justin. I spent all night making sure I didn't ruin my financial karma and your bad luck. You're a liability. His face finally darkened, the pleasant mask slipping. But I didn't wait for a reply. I walked away, leaving him standing there, the first true crack in his supreme confidence finally showing. I didn't look back. I had a club meeting to get to. And somewhere in the pit of my stomach, a new, terrifying question was forming. If Justin was so wrong about last night, what else was he wrong about? And what, exactly, had I gotten myself into with Carter Reed? The campus walkways were bathed in the honey-gold light of late afternoon, but I felt shrouded in a private twilight. Justin's words echoed in my head, a toxic mantra. I know nothing really happened. He doesn't do messy. You don't do that. He'd been so smug, so utterly confident in his version of events. It was infuriating, but worse, it was isolating. It made the memories of the night with Carter feel like a fever dream, something that existed only in the secret, shameful corners of my mind. My club, the Business Strategy Forum, was having its weekly meeting. It was the last place I wanted to be, but my attendance record was pristine, and hiding in my dorm felt too much like letting Justin win. I needed normalcy or a facsimile of it. I slipped into the conference room just as people were settling in. The air was thick with the smell of old coffee and whiteboard markers. Carter, as vice president, was already there, leaning against the far wall near the window, scrolling through his phone. He was dressed in a simple black crewneck and dark jeans, his hair slightly tousled as if he'd run his hands through it. He looked normal, unaffected, like a man who hadn't fundamentally upended my world less than 24 hours ago. A painful knot tightened in my chest. I'd expected something, a glance, a flicker of recognition, anything. But he gave no indication he even saw me enter. The hollow feeling from the morning yawned wider. It was just a night. A dare. He's already moved on. I found an empty seat near the back and busied myself with unpacking my notebook, willing my hands not to shake. Excuse me? Senior Mitchell? I looked up. A freshman girl from my introductory econ class was hovering beside me, twisting her fingers together. She had a sweet, round face and nervous eyes. Hi, Chloe, right? I said, forcing a polite smile. She nodded, blushing. Yeah. I was wondering. You're friends with Senior Reed, right? The question was an ice pick to the ribs. I know him, I said carefully, my voice neutral. Do you know if he's seeing anyone? She whispered, her eyes darting toward Carter's oblivious form by the window. I really want to ask him out, but I don't want to, step on anyone's toes. The universe had a truly cruel sense of humor. Here I was, physically aching from the man's touch, while a sweet-natured freshman was asking me for dating intel. The shame and absurdity of my situation threatened to choke me. I had to protect his precious, untouchable image. I had to be the good girl even in this. I shook my head, perhaps too vigorously. He doesn't have a girlfriend, I said, the words tasting like ash. But I'm not really familiar with him. We've hardly ever spoken. It was the truth, technically. We hadn't done much talking. Chloe's face lit up. Oh, okay. So you don't know, what he's into? Hobbies or anything? I'm sorry, I really don't. My voice was tight. I needed this conversation to end. He's pretty private. Right, of course, she said, a little deflated but still hopeful. Thanks anyway, Senior. She scurried away just as the club president called the meeting to order. I tried to focus on the agenda. Upcoming case competition, guest speaker, logistics. But my gaze kept drifting against my will to the window. Carter hadn't moved. But as the president droned on, I saw his head lift slowly from his phone. His eyes, those cool, analytical gray eyes, found mine across the crowded room. There was no smile, no warmth. Just a steady, penetrating look that held me pinned in my seat. Then the corner of his mouth quirked up. Not in amusement. In something darker. More knowing. A soft, mocking laugh carried across the sudden quiet of the room. The president had paused and Carter's voice, though quiet, was perfectly audible. True, he said, his gaze never leaving mine. A chill skittered down my spine. After all, it was just me talking last night. All you said was, and He paused, letting the horrifying implication hang in the stunned silence. I didn't even need to ask. The room didn't understand. They heard a cryptic, probably risque joke from the aloof Carter Reed. A few people chuckled awkwardly. Chloe looked confused. But I understood. My face burned as if scalded. He'd heard me. He'd heard me lying, distancing myself, and he was calling me on it in the most brutal, public way possible. This wasn't indifference. This was punishment. The meeting dissolved into a blur of noise and heat pressing against my skin. The moment it was adjourned, I shot out of my seat, my only thought to escape. I barely made it to the hallway before a hand closed around my upper arm, firm and unyielding. Not so fast. Carter's voice was low in my ear. He steered me, not gently, into an empty classroom across the hall, kicking the door shut behind us. The familiar setting, the rows of desks, the dusty chalkboards, made the surreal violation feel even sharper. He released me and I stumbled back, putting a desk between us. What was that? I hissed, my voice trembling with rage and humiliation. Why would you say that? He didn't answer immediately. He just looked at me, his expression unreadable. Then he moved. In 2 strides he was around the desk, and before I could react he stepped in close, blocking my escape, his presence overwhelming. He planted his hands on either side of my hips, caging me in. Didn't see this coming, Junior, he said, his voice a deceptively soft growl. You're quite the troublemaker. His proximity was overwhelming. He was all sharp angles and controlled anger, smelling like soap and that faint, spicy cologne. I had to tilt my head back to look at him, putting me at a severe disadvantage. I was trying to be discreet. I shot back, my defiance fueled by panic. For you. I wasn't going to tell your fan club the details of your. Why what? He challenged, leaning in closer. His lips were inches from mine. Finish the sentence, Sophia. Your one-night stand. I blurted out, the words hurting as they left my mouth. He went very still. The air between us crackled. Is that what you think that was? What else would it be? My voice broke. You were gone when I woke up. No note, no message. You haven't called or texted. You just ignored me in the meeting until you decided to humiliate me. That's the definition of a one-night stand, Carter. A muscle ticked in his jaw. He leaned back slightly, his gaze raking over my face as if searching for something. You left without a word, he stated, his tone shifting from anger to something flatter, colder. You were gone. I went to get breakfast, he said, each word clipped. There was a message on your phone. From me. Telling you to wait. That I'd be back in 20 minutes. I stared at him, my anger stuttering. My phone was dead. I turned it off after Justin called. I forgot to turn it back on until I was in the lobby. The revelation hung between us. The furious tension bled out of his shoulders, replaced by a different kind of intensity. He looked away out the classroom window and let out a short, humorless laugh. Of course it was. You thought I just snuck out? The pieces were crashing together. His coldness at the meeting, his cruel comment. You thought I was avoiding you? He turned his head back to me, and for the first time, I saw something vulnerable flicker in the depths of his gray eyes. It was quickly buried under a layer of simmering frustration. I didn't expect you to run a marathon to get away from me, but yes. The thought crossed my mind. His voice dropped, taking on a bitter edge. I didn't expect you to dislike me so much that you'd ignore my calls and messages just to put distance between us. The misunderstanding was so vast, so tragic, it left me breathless. All my hurt, my assumption of being discarded, mirrored his own. I don't dislike you, Carter, I said, my voice softening despite myself. I woke up, you weren't there. I thought you had left. That it was over. My phone was off. I didn't ignore you on purpose. He studied my face as if weighing the truth of my words. The defensive anger seemed to drain from him, leaving him looking tired and younger. He sighed, one hand coming up to rub the back of his neck. I bought you a croissant. It went stale. A ridiculous wet laugh escaped me. It was all so stupid. I'm sorry about the croissant. A faint, real smile touched his lips, there and gone. His hand settled back on the desk near my hip, his fingers drumming once. "So," he said, the single word loaded. With the misunderstanding cleared up. He leaned in again, but this time the threat was gone, replaced by a predatory warmth. His other hand came to rest on my waist, his thumb brushing the sliver of skin between my sweater and my jeans. "Junior," he murmured, his voice low and steady. "You'll take responsibility for me, right?" His eyes held mine, polite on the surface but with a glint of pure, unadulterated menace underneath. He wasn't asking. He was stating a fact and waiting for my acknowledgement. The good girl in me wanted to stammer, to negotiate, to flee. But the girl who had kissed him back, who had shattered in his arms, who was still thrumming from his proximity, just nodded. It was a small, terrified motion. He smiled then, a real one that transformed his face, making him breathtaking. "Good." He released me and took a step back, giving me space to slide off the desk. My legs were wobbly. I smoothed my sweater, my mind reeling. Take responsibility? What did that even mean? "We should get back," I mumbled, turning toward the door, desperate for air and time to think. "Sophia." I stopped, my hand on the doorknob. His voice was quiet, serious, all traces of teasing gone. "I don't want you to misunderstand and think I'm only doing this out of some twisted sense of obligation from the dare." He waited until I turned to look at him. He was standing in a shaft of afternoon sunlight, his expression as clear and open as I'd ever seen it. "So let me be clear. I like you." My heart stopped. "I've liked you," he continued, his gaze steady, "for a long time." The confession hung in the dusty classroom air, simple and devastating. It explained everything in nothing. The hand extended in the bar. The fierce protectiveness. The hurt when he thought I'd fled. It wasn't just strategy or honor. It was him. Before I could form a single syllable in response, he nodded toward the door, his business mask sliding back into place. "Meeting's probably done. See you around, Mitchell." He walked out, leaving me alone in the empty classroom, my world tilted once more on its axis. The next week passed in a strange liminal space. Campus was abuzz with the fallout from the bar night, but the narrative had solidified. Justin and I had a dramatic breakup and I'd left with Carter Reed as a spectacular F***. But nothing actually happened because, come on, it was Carter. Justin, it seemed, had been busy spreading his version of the truth. I was too preoccupied to care. Carter's confession played on a loop in my head. "I've liked you for a long time." It changed the color of every past interaction, every distant glance I'd written off as him being Carter. It made the memory of our night together feel less like a reckless accident and more like a collision that had been building for miles. We didn't have any classes together and he didn't seek me out. But I felt his presence. A text in the morning. "Croissant today? It's fresh." A casual sighting of him across the quad, his eyes finding mine for a second before moving on. He was giving me space but letting me know he was there. It was maddening and thrilling. The awkwardness was entirely mine. When I finally replied to his croissant text with a simple okay, he was waiting outside my morning lecture with a paper bag and 2 coffees. We walked in silence for a few minutes. "This is weird," I finally said, sipping the coffee, black just how I liked it. "How did he know?" "Is it?" He took a bite of his own pastry. "We shared a bed. We've seen each other extensively. This seems fairly straightforward in comparison." I choked on my coffee. "You can't just say things like that." "Why not? It's true." He glanced at me, that faint smile playing on his lips again. "The truth is only awkward if you're afraid of it." He had a point. A terrifying, liberating point. I decided, tentatively, to stop being afraid. The shift was subtle. We started studying together at the library, though studying often involved him explaining derivatives while I tried not to stare at the way his brow furrowed in concentration. We got dinner once at a off-campus noodle shop. It was quiet, sometimes painfully so, but not uncomfortable. He was a surprisingly good listener, asking pointed questions about my finance classes, my family back in Ohio, my fear of economic instability that drove my good girl persona. He offered little about himself in return, but I was learning him in other ways. The precise way he organized his notes, his dry, understated sense of humor, the way his guard dropped completely when he talked about algorithmic trading. The barrier finally broke on a Thursday evening. We were at his apartment, the scene of the crime as I privately thought of it, ostensibly to work on a joint case analysis for the club. His Siamese cat, a sleek creature with piercing blue eyes named Sphinx, had taken an instant, aloof liking to me, deigning to sit on my lap as I typed. "He usually hates everyone," Carter remarked from the kitchen where he was making tea. "I have a way with fragile male egos," I said without thinking, then froze, the laptop keys biting into my fingers. It was the first direct reference I'd made to Justin or to that night. Carter went still for a moment, then turned, leaning against the countertop. "Is that what I have? A fragile ego?" "No," I said, meeting his gaze honestly. "You have a controlled one. It's more dangerous." He considered that, then nodded slowly as if I'd passed a test. He brought over 2 mugs of tea. As he set mine down, his fingers brushed mine. A simple touch, but it sent a current through me that had nothing to do with the hot porcelain. We didn't get much more work done. The case study was abandoned as we talked about nothing and everything. Movies, the absurdity of campus politics, our post-graduation dreams. He wanted to start his own quant fund. I wanted a stable, powerful corporate job that would make my parents weep with relief. We were opposites, and yet the friction felt creative, not destructive. As the sky darkened outside his floor-to-ceiling windows, he put on a movie, some sleek European thriller. He sat on the sofa, and after a moment's hesitation I sat beside him, leaving a careful foot of space between us. Sphinx settled in the gap. Halfway through the film, Carter reached over the cat and took my hand. His palm was warm, his fingers threading through mine with a certainty that stole my breath. He didn't look at me, his eyes fixed on the screen where a car chase was unfolding. He just held my hand, his thumb stroking slow circles on my knuckle. It was the most intimate thing we'd done since the night we'd met. By the time the credits rolled, the careful distance was gone. I was leaning against his shoulder, his arm around me, my head tucked under his chin. The movie was forgotten. "This is better than I anticipated," he said quietly, his voice a rumble against my temple. "What is this?" "Here." He paused. "The half-year schedule." I pulled back to look at him. "Half-year schedule?" He looked slightly embarrassed, a rare expression on him. "I had a plan. After the bar, if you ever gave me a chance. I was prepared for it to take you 6 months to even consider liking me. To get over him, to see me as something other than his friend or a walking dare." He gave a small, self-deprecating shrug. "I'm ahead of schedule." The admission was so vulnerable it hurt my heart. "You had a schedule?" "I like to be prepared for all outcomes." He cupped my cheek, his touch feather-light. "The most likely outcome was that you'd never like me back. But I figured if I was good to you, better than anyone else, you might at least be willing to stay around." To hear Carter Reed, the golden boy who could have anyone, articulate such a humble, patient hope was utterly disarming. The last of my walls crumbled. I saw not the aloof prince, but the man who'd been watching from a distance, calculating his odds in a game he thought he'd already lost. "Carter," I whispered your name, feeling new and intimate on my tongue. "You don't have to earn me. And you shouldn't put yourself last." He smiled, a real, warm, unguarded smile that lit up his whole face. "That's not possible," he said softly. He leaned forward, his forehead touching mine. "If I could control that, I would have stopped liking you a long time ago." He kissed me then. Not with the desperate hunger of our first night, but with a sweet, slow certainty that promised this was a beginning, not an end. Tasted like tea and hope. Later, as we rested together on his sofa, the city lights twinkling beyond the windows, I finally felt it. The progress bar in my heart, the one labeled liking Carter, clicked past 50%, 75%, and settled somewhere in the high 90s, humming with potential. He nuzzled my neck, his arms locked around me. "I love you, Sophia Mitchell," he murmured, his voice thick with sleep and something that sounded like wonder. The words should have scared me. They were too fast, too big. But nestled in the circle of his arms, with the ghost of Justin's dismissal finally fading, they felt like the only truth that mattered. I turned in his embrace, facing him. In the semi-darkness I found his lips and kissed him, pouring my answer into it. My confusion, my hope, my overwhelming, terrifying yes. "I know," I whispered against his mouth. He held me tighter, and for the first time in a long time, I felt not like a good girl, or a rebellion or a convenient fixture, but like simply myself. And that was more than enough. Falling for Carter Reed was like learning a new language. The grammar of him was complex, built on silent looks, deliberate actions, and words that were spare but carried immense weight. "I love you" wasn't thrown around casually. He'd said it that once in the vulnerable dark and never again in so many words. Instead he said it by showing up. By knowing I had a big accounting midterm and leaving a stress relief tea and a pack of my favorite gel pens outside my dorm door. By quietly rearranging his formidable schedule to walk me to my evening class when a series of campus mugging reports started circulating. Lila, Justin's doe-eyed junior, had faded from our immediate orbit. She was seen around campus with a new, permanent glow, often clinging to the arm of a linebacker from the football team. Justin, however, was a ghost I couldn't seem to shake. He'd switched from pleading to a sort of bitter, watchful silence. I'd catch him staring at me from across the dining hall or see him lingering near the business school building. He never approached when I was with Carter, but his presence was a cold spot in my periphery. Carter and I were careful, or at least I was trying to be careful. My life had been a flat, predictable plane for so long, and now I was soaring through unpredictable thermals. It was exhilarating and terrifying. We didn't flaunt our relationship, but we didn't hide it either. We were just studying in the library, sharing meals, his fingers often laced with mine under the table. The campus gossip mill, initially obsessed with the dare, had moved on to fresher scandals, settling on the comfortable conclusion that Carter Reed was just being atypically nice to a girl who'd had a public meltdown. Then the flyers started appearing. They were taped to lampposts, bulletin boards, the glass doors of the student union. "Attention! Reported flasher in the Riverside area near campus." The description was vague. Male, large build, wearing a dark hoodie. The flyers urged students, especially women, to be vigilant, travel in pairs, and report anything suspicious. I glanced at them with a detached concern, filed the information away, and focused on the mountain of work piling up as finals approached. My econometrics professor believed in baptism by fire, and I was drowning in regression models. One evening, after a particularly brutal study session that left my brain feeling like overcooked oatmeal, I decided to take the long way back to my dorm. The riverside path was quieter, lined with old oak trees, and the chill in the air helped clear the fog of numbers in my head. I was wrapped in my thickest coat, earbuds in, listening to a lecture recap at half speed, when a man stepped out from behind a large tree trunk about 20 feet ahead of me. He matched the flyer description. Tall, heavy-set, in a baggy dark hoodie pulled low. Time didn't slow down. It just became very, very clear. I stopped walking. I pulled out my earbuds, the tinny voice of my professor cutting off. The man stood there, his posture expectant, waiting for the scream, the gasp, the frantic flight. A cold, sharp calm settled over me. It wasn't bravery. It was a profound, soul-deep annoyance. After everything, Justin's betrayal, the emotional roller coaster with Carter, the unrelenting academic pressure. This pathetic, tired act was the universe's next joke? I didn't scream. I sighed, a long, weary exhale that fogged in the cold air. I took a step closer, not away. His confident leer faltered. I let my eyes travel downward, then back up to his shadowed face. I clicked my tongue, the sound disgusted and unimpressed. "Seriously?" My voice was flat, echoing in the quiet path. "You brought that to the show and tell? Is this really the best attempt at intimidation you've got?" His jaw dropped. This was not in the script. "I mean, come on," I continued, taking another casual step forward. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my voice remained steady, dripping with contempt. "This is embarrassing. For you. You must be so proud. My boyfriend has nothing to prove to strangers." The man, clearly startled, sputtered, his face flushing a deep, mottled red. "You stupid bi." Language. I cut him off, raising a finger. I was buzzing with a dangerous, electric energy. My fear had been incinerated by white-hot anger. This creep thought he could wield power through shock and shame? He'd picked the wrong woman on the wrong day. I was fresh out of shame. "You're the one putting your inadequacy on public display. Don't get mad at me for giving you a review." I swung my backpack off my shoulder, making him flinch. I unzipped it slowly, deliberately, keeping my eyes on him. "You want an audience? Let's get you a real one." I pulled out my phone, unlocked it, and opened the camera app, switching to video. The red recording light glowed like a malevolent eye. "I'll go live. Tag the location. Local man desperate for attention at the expense of others he needs the whole neighborhood to see. The comments will be brutal. I took a slow zoomed-in pan down and back up. Say cheese. My other hand was deep in the front pocket of my backpack. My fingers closed around the cold, hard cylinder of the keychain pepper spray my dad had insisted I carry. My pulse was a drum solo in my ears, but my hand was steady. The man's fury was palpable. He took a threatening step forward, his fists clenching. You give me that phone, you little. Then his eyes flicked to something behind me and his face went from rage to sheer panic. He fumbled with his pants, turned and lumbered off into the bushes with a speed that belied his size, a comical, frantic retreat. The adrenaline drained out of me so fast I swayed on my feet. I lowered the phone, my thumb hitting the stop record button. I hadn't actually been recording. The battery was at 2%. But he hadn't waited to find out. That, said a familiar dry voice from behind me, was the most terrifying and impressive thing I have ever witnessed. I turned. Carter was standing about 10 feet back, having approached silently on the paved path. He wasn't smiling. His face was pale, his eyes wide, tracing over me as if checking for injuries. Then his gaze snapped to the spot where the man had disappeared, his expression hardening into something lethal. Are you hurt? He asked, his voice tight. He closed the distance between us in 3 long strides. No, I breathed, finally starting to tremble now that the immediate danger was past. I'm okay. He reached me and his hands came up, framing my face, his touch firm, grounding. You're sure? His thumb stroked my cheeks. He didn't touch you? I shook my head, leaning into his hands. No. He was just waiting for a reaction. Carter's eyes searched mine, the storm in them gradually subsiding into a look of awe. A slow, incredulous smile spread across his face. A cocktail weenie on a sequoia? He repeated, his voice tinged with laughter and residual fear. Christ, Sophia. He pulled me into a fierce hug, crushing me against his chest. I could feel his heart pounding, a frantic rhythm against my ear. When I saw him step out, and you just walked toward him, he buried his face in my hair. Don't ever do that again. Call me. Run. Scream. Do not engage in comparative anatomical critique with a pervert. I laughed, a shaky, hysterical sound. It was just, he was so pathetic. I was so tired. I didn't have the energy to be scared. He held me at arm's length, his expression serious again. You should have been scared. He could have been violent. I had my pepper spray, I said, pulling the little cylinder from my pocket to show him. He took it from my trembling fingers, examined it and handed it back. Good. But next time spray first, insult later. Promise me. I promise, I said and meant it. The bravado was gone, leaving behind a hollow, shaky feeling. He kept an arm around my shoulders, tucking me securely into his side as we turned to walk back toward the main campus lights. I was about to ask what he was doing out here when another voice cut through the twilight. May I ask, it said, cold and clipped, who this boyfriend is that you're using for comparative measurements? Is it? He was standing under a street lamp about 30 yards away, his hands in his pockets. He must have been walking behind Carter. How much had he seen? How much had he heard? My body went rigid. Carter's arm tightened around me, but he otherwise didn't react. Justin walked closer, his face a mask of icy calm. That was quite a performance, Sophia. I didn't know you had it in you. His eyes flicked to Carter. And you, just standing there, letting your girlfriend confront a pervert. Some protector. Carter's response was a lazy, unbothered shrug. She had it handled. More than handled. What do you think? The dismissive tone was a spark to Justin's tinder. I think, Justin said, his voice dropping to a low, threatening register, that we need to have a conversation. Alone. His gaze locked on me. This doesn't concern you, Reed. Everything about her concerns me, Carter replied, his voice dropping all pretense of casualness. It was pure polished steel. In that split second, the unanswered question from weeks ago slammed back into the forefront of my mind with the force of a truck. How was Justin so sure nothing happened that night? Carter wouldn't have told him. The pieces clicked together with a sickening clarity. Justin, I said, stepping out from the shelter of Carter's arm. My voice was calm, eerily so. How did you know we went back to the bar that night? The quiet one off 5th Street. The question threw him. His mask of anger slipped, revealing a flicker of surprise before he smoothed it over. What? You were so certain nothing happened between us. He said we probably just sat and talked. How did you even know where we went to talk? He recovered quickly, a sneer twisting his lips. Do I look like I have time to follow you two around? No, I said, taking a step toward him. You don't. So how? He stared at me, then let out a short, contemptuous laugh. He pulled out his phone, tapped it a few times and turned the screen toward us. It was a chat log from a small group, the executive board of the Finance Society, which Justin presided over. He scrolled to a message from that night from a guy named Ben. Ben, 1:47 a.m. Dude just drove past the vault on 5th. Reed's car is parked out front. So, guess he's really committing to the bit. The messages that followed were a series of laughing emojis and jokes about Carter's legendary disinterest and my safe rebellion. The narrative was built in real time. Carter and Sophia were holed up in a bar to save face, nothing more. Justin lowered the phone. See? The whole board knew. You two camped out at a bar to make your point. Big deal. His gaze shifted to Carter, the sneer deepening. Unless you're going to tell me you two did it in a back room at the vault. Wouldn't that be tacky? I saw Carter tense, a predator coiling to spring. I put a hand on his arm, holding him back. This was my fight. So, because your lackey saw a car, I said slowly, you constructed a whole story that let you off the hook. You convinced yourself and anyone who would listen that I was just playing a prank. That I wasn't capable of actually leaving you. That Carter wasn't capable of actually wanting me. It wasn't a story, it was the truth. Justin snapped, his calm finally shattering. You're not his type, Sophia. He doesn't do messy, emotional train wrecks. He does spreadsheets. And you don't do one-night stands with campus legends. You do stable, long-term boyfriends who can give you the security you're so obsessed with. Each word was a lash. They were meant to hurt, to put me back in my box. But they just sounded small and desperate. You're wrong, I said simply. On every count. Justin's eyes blazed. He took a final step, closing the distance between us, ignoring Carter completely. Carter, he said, Carter McCurse. If you really slept with my girlfriend that night, I swear to God, I'll make you regret it for the rest of your life. That did it. I moved instantly, placing myself squarely between Justin and Carter. Stop it, Justin. This is insane. I broke up with you. In front of everyone. How many times do I have to say it? Carter gently but firmly moved me aside. He walked up to Justin until they were toe-to. Carter was taller, his calm a palpable force against Justin's vibrating fury. It wasn't me who slept with her, Carter said, his voice dangerously soft. Justin's lip curled in triumph. Then Carter finished, his words clear and sharp as shattered glass. It was her who slept with me. The thread of Justin's control snapped. He cursed, a raw, ugly sound, and swung. Carter moved like lightning. He caught Justin's wrist mid-swing, twisted it down and behind his back, and used the momentum to shove him hard. Justin stumbled, off balance. Carter didn't let up. He grabbed a fistful of Justin's shirt front and yanked him close. What right do you have to question me? Carter growled, his face inches from Justin's. The icy control was gone, replaced by a fury I'd only glimpsed once before. Huh. If you hadn't been such a condescending, disloyal prick, would she have even looked twice at me? Justin gasped, trying to wrench free. Carter abruptly released his shirt and shoved him backwards. Justin staggered, and Carter acted quickly, forcing Justin back and ending the confrontation decisively. Carter stood over him, breathing heavily, looking down with an expression of pure disdain. I'm really puzzled, he said, his voice cold again. What made you so confident that no matter how badly you behaved, she would never leave you? Justin coughed, pushing himself up on his elbows. His eyes found me standing a few feet away, watching it all unfold. His gaze was a complex storm of pain, hatred, and a dawning, horrifying realization. I felt nothing. No pity, no satisfaction. Just a weary finality. Carter turned his back on him and walked toward me. He held out his hand. I took it without hesitation. His fingers closed around mine, warm and sure. As we walked away, leaving Justin coughing in the grass, I didn't lower my voice. The last of my filters were gone. He's so weak, I said to Carter, the words casual, almost an afterthought. Carter squeezed my hand. He's irrelevant. And in that moment, under the cold stars, with my hand in his and the ghost of my past literally lying in the dirt behind us, I believed him. The quiet after the storm on the riverside path was deceptive. Justin didn't get up and chase after us. He just faded into the background, a sullen, bruised shadow. The story of the confrontation, however, did not remain quiet. Campus was a small town and news, especially the juicy, violent kind, traveled at light speed. By the next morning, whispers followed Carter and me everywhere. "Did you hear? Carter Reed kicked Justin's ass by the river. Over that Sophia girl. The one from the dare. I heard Justin caught them together and lost it. No, I heard Sophia was being harassed and Carter stepped in." The truth was a tangled knot, and the gossip mill happily chose the most dramatic threads. I didn't care. I felt strangely, powerfully free. Seeing Justin on the ground, the architect of my insecurity laid low by his own arrogance, and Carter's fist had cauterized a wound I hadn't fully acknowledged was still bleeding. Carter, for his part, was unnervingly normal. He treated the fight with the same detached analysis he applied to market fluctuations. An inefficient use of energy, but sometimes a necessary market correction, he'd said over coffee the next day, his knuckles slightly scraped. He seemed more concerned with whether the incident had rattled me. I assured him it hadn't. If anything, I felt stronger. Our relationship settled into a new, deeper rhythm. We spent more nights at his apartment. I'd study on his sofa with Sphinx purring in my lap while he worked on his senior thesis, a complex algorithmic trading model. We'd cook simple meals together in his pristine kitchen, and he'd patiently explain the math behind his models until my eyes glazed over. The physical connection was a constant, quiet hum, a hand on the small of my back, a kiss on the top of my head as he passed, the deep, wordless intimacy of shared sleep. It was during one of these quiet evenings, as we were walking back to campus from grabbing takeout, that we ran into Lila. She was leaving the library, and the glow she'd been sporting was gone, replaced by puffy, red-rimmed eyes and a blotchy complexion. She looked like she'd been crying for days. When she saw us, her steps faltered. She stood in our path, wringing her hands. "Senior Reed," she said, her voice small and thick. Her eyes darted to me, then away, filled with a toxic mix of misery and resentment. "You and Sophia, you're really together now?" Carter's polite, public mask slid into place, the one that was friendly but impenetrable. "Is that any of your business, Lila?" he asked, his tone light but with an edge. She flinched but pressed on, a desperate courage pushing her. I wanted to warn you." She looked directly at me now, her gaze hardening. "You might not really know what kind of person she is. Don't let her fool you." The audacity was a slap. Before Carter could react, I was stepping forward, the calm I'd found since the riverside path solidifying into something cold and sharp. "Oh, is that right?" I said, my voice sweetly venomous. "And you're the world's leading expert on Sophia Mitchell? Should I have you officially renamed? How about Mitchell's personal parasite? Has a nice ring." Lila's face contorted with fury and humiliation. "Mere Sophia." "Shut up." "No, you shut up," Carter cut in, his voice losing its polite veneer. It was quiet, but it carried a finality that silenced her instantly. He looked at her with a detached, almost clinical curiosity. "Actually, I think I know you better than I knew Sophia for a long time." He paused, tilting his head. "Homewrecker. Third wheel." He gave her a small, mock-polite smile. "How would you like me to address you?" The color drained from Lila's face, leaving her looking ghostly under the library's exterior lights. She opened her mouth, closed it, and then, with a choked sound, spun on her heel and fled, her shoulders hunched. I stared after her, my anger cooling into pity. "That was harsh." "It was accurate," Carter said, taking my hand again. He brought my knuckles to his lips. "She doesn't get to attack you. Not after what she did. No one does." I thought that was the end of it. Lila had been publicly shamed and had run away. I assumed she'd lick her wounds and move on, hopefully toward some self-reflection. I was naive. The attack came 2 days later, not in person but in the digital town square, the campus confession wall on Facebook. It was a closed group with thousands of members, a chaotic stream of anonymous crushes, rants, and occasional scandals. A post blew up just after lunch. It wasn't anonymous. It was under Lila's full name. The title was a masterpiece of manipulative victimhood. "Not here to expose anyone, just want to use public opinion to make Senior Sophia realize the seriousness of her actions." My stomach dropped. I clicked on the video. There was Lila, sitting in what looked like her dorm room, her face pale and devoid of makeup, her eyes red raw. She looked heartbreakingly young and genuinely distressed. She spoke softly, tearfully into the camera. "I don't know how to say this. I just feel so broken," she began, a tremor in her voice. "For months I've been in a relationship with Justin. It was private, he wanted to keep it that way out of respect for his recent breakup. But we were happy. Or I thought we were." A single, perfect tear traced down her cheek. Then Sophia Mitchell came back into the picture. Even though she was publicly with Carter Reed, she kept texting Justin, calling him late at night, telling him she missed him, that she'd made a mistake. I watched, numb with disbelief. She was painting a picture of me as a jealous, two-timing harpy, unable to let Justin go, deliberately sabotaging his new happiness. She played on his guilt, on their history, Lila wept. And last week he broke up with me. He said he was confused, that he still had feelings for her because she wouldn't let him move on. She looked directly into the camera, her expression pleading. "Senior Sophia, if you're seeing this, please. Just stop. You have Carter. He's a great guy. Why do you need to ruin what I had too? I'm not asking for a confrontation. I just want my life back." The video ended. She had meticulously crafted a narrative where she was the innocent victim, Justin was a confused pawn, and I was a malicious, emotionally greedy villain. Baker? She never once mentioned her own role in kissing Justin at the bar, in the dare that started it all. She'd erased herself as the instigator completely. I closed my eyes, a sick, cold fury rising in my throat. This was worse than Justin's condescension. This was a calculated attempt to destroy my reputation, to make me a pariah. With dread, I opened the comments. I braced for a torrent of abuse, for my name to be dragged through the mud. The first few were what I expected. "Wow, that's messy. Didn't she just get with Carter Reed? WF." But as I scrolled, my confusion grew. The top comments, the ones with hundreds of likes, were not what I anticipated. Top comment 1, "Oh my God, the audacity. The mistress is playing the victim? Sweetie, we all know you were the one sniffing around Justin when he was with Sophia. You think blurring the timeline changes that? Get a mirror." Top comment 2, "Even without reading that other post, I don't believe a word of this. Ever since I heard how Sophia Mitchell verbally eviscerated that Riverside pervert while recording him, I've been a stan. That girl has zero fucks to give and wouldn't waste time on a loser like Justin." Top comment 3, "Came here from the other post just to tell you you're a disgusting homewrecker. And Justin's a spineless worm. Hashtag Team Sophia." Top comment 4, "PSA, I've already filed a formal complaint with the Finance Society Board about Justin's conduct. Enjoy your sinking ship, both of you." My breath caught. That other post? I scrolled down, past a sea of comments roasting Lila and supporting me, until I found a link shared by multiple people. "If you believe this, read this first." I clicked. It took me to another post on the confession wall. This one was also under a real name. Carter Reed. It was long, easily over 2,000 words. It was not emotional. It was a forensic dismantling. He had posted it a mere 3 minutes after Lila's video went live. He started with the facts, presented with cold, irrefutable clarity. The date, time, and location of the truth or dare game. He mentioned witnesses. He described the dare given to Lila, her specific choice of Justin, and Justin's willing participation in the kiss. He linked to social media posts from that night from other attendees, showing the timeline. Then he moved to the aftermath. He posted screenshots, not of my phone but of his own call logs showing Justin's frantic calls to him that night, Justin's texts demanding to know where his girlfriend was. He highlighted Justin's own words from the Riverside, quoting his arrogant certainty that nothing had happened at the vault. But the most devastating part was about Lila. Carter, it turned out, had a friend who worked as a campus RA. With discreet, ethical inquiries, he stressed that no privacy rules were broken. He'd established a pattern. Lila had a history of fixating on taken men, of creating private relationships that conveniently had no public footprint until she was ready to play the victim. He didn't name other names, but the implication was clear. This was a pattern, not a one-time tragedy. His conclusion was succinct. Sophia Mitchell ended her relationship with Justin Peters the moment he disrespected her. She has not contacted him since. Any narrative suggesting otherwise is a fabrication designed to harass her and deflect accountability. The only person here guilty of deliberate emotional manipulation is the one posting tearful videos with selective amnesia. He ended the post with a simple, powerful line. I am not posting this as her boyfriend. I am posting it as a witness to the truth. Attack her again and you deal with me. It was a masterpiece. It was protective, furious, and devastatingly effective. The comments on his post were a chorus of, King, and, I would die for a man who defended me like this. The tide of public opinion had not just shifted. It had tsunamied in my favor before Lila's video had even finished processing. I sat in the silent common room of my dorm, tears of a completely different kind prickling my eyes. He'd seen it coming. He'd been prepared. He'd had the evidence ready to deploy at a moment's notice. My phone vibrated in my hand. It was Carter. I answered, my voice thick. How did you know? He understood the question. He chuckled softly. I didn't, not for sure. I just took precautions. Knowing her nature. You didn't have to do that. The truth would have come out. She would have imploded on her own eventually. There was a pause on the other end of the line. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet, stripped of all its usual coolness. But I didn't want to give them even a single day to attack you. Not one. The words were a direct hit to my heart. He hadn't just defended me, he'd erected a preemptive shield. He'd taken the blow for me before it could even land. The carefully constructed walls around my heart, the ones that had finally started to relax, dissolved completely. My mind buzzed, full of static and light. I couldn't form a coherent thought beyond the overwhelming need to see him. Where are you? I asked. Club office. Finishing up some budget stuff. Stay there. I hung up, grabbed my coat and ran. I didn't care who saw me sprinting across the quad, my face undoubtedly a mess of emotion. I burst into the business strategy forum office, chest heaving. Carter was sitting at the president's desk, laptop open. He looked up, surprised. Before he could say a word, I was across the room. I didn't hug him. I just stopped in front of the desk, my hands braced on the edge, leaning toward him. You, I started, then swallowed. The post. It had a file on her. He leaned back in the chair, a faint, wary smile on his face. I prefer to think of it as a risk assessment with supporting documentation. You posted it 3 minutes after she did. You were monitoring the page. I have alerts set up for certain keywords, he admitted, not looking the least bit ashamed. Your name. My name. Justin's. Standard reputation management. I stared at him, this beautiful, brilliant, terrifyingly efficient man. He'd fought for me not with fists this time, but with data, strategy, and flawless timing. It was the most romantic, unsettling thing anyone had ever done for me. I was about to tell him exactly that when a voice from the doorway froze the words in my throat. Carter. Carter had afraid of me. He was leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed. He looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, but his expression was one of grim, almost amused satisfaction. Carter didn't even flinch. He just looked at Justin with an expression of profound boredom. Sure, he said, his tone indulgent. Whatever you need to tell yourself. I saw the clarification you posted, Justin said, ignoring Carter's dismissal. He sounded intrigued, like a scientist examining a curious specimen. You posted it so fast, it's clear you had all that evidence ready to go. But why? He took a step into the room. Because you're afraid I'd come out and clarify things myself. Through the narrow glass window of the office door, I saw the stylus in Carter's hand slip from his fingers and clatter to the floor. He said nothing. The casual mask was gone, replaced by a stark, still tension. Justin saw it too. His confidence grew. You're afraid I'd clarify, steal your thunder, and then Sophia would be so touched, he sneered the word, that she'd come running back to me. He took another step, his gaze locking onto me for a second before returning to Carter. If I'm not mistaken, Sophia hasn't told you she loves you yet, has she? The air left the room. Carter's face was a careful blank, but I saw the minute tightening around his eyes. He bent to pick up the stylus, his movements deliberate. Are you done? He asked, his voice dangerously quiet. The door's over there. Justin acted as if he hadn't heard. His tone shifted to one of reflective, patronizing wisdom. I know her better than you do. She can't fall for you that quickly. Even if she's with you, it's only because you two slept together. Forced love is pointless, Carter. He spree a Carterans, a mocking gesture of reason. Let her go. You're just her rebellion. I'm her reality. This self-righteous, delusional man was standing in the ruins of his own making, trying to dictate the narrative of my heart. Rage, clean and white-hot, flooded my veins. It burned away any last vestige of pity or shared history. I didn't look at Carter. I turned and walked out of the office, my steps measured. Justin's eyes followed me, a flicker of confusion in his triumphant gaze. I went straight to the janitor's closet down the hall. Inside I found a plastic bucket. I carried it to the women's restroom, filled it halfway with cold water from the sink and marched back to the office. Justin was still talking, his voice a drone of arrogance. She needs stability, security. You can't give her that. You're a gamble. I'm a sure thing. I pushed the door open with my foot. Justin and Carter both turned. Sophia, Justin stammered, his smug expression faltering. I didn't speak. I walked right up to him and held the bucket in front of his chest. Justin, I said, my voice eerily calm. Look down at the bucket. His eyes widened with a mix of surprise and a pathetic, hopeful pleasure. You? He thought I was bringing him water? An offering? Look down. I commanded. Bewildered, he obeyed, peering into the bucket of clear water. See it clearly? I asked softly. He nodded, still confused. I let go of the bucket. It dropped like a stone. The water exploded upwards, drenching the front of his pants and shoes in a freezing deluge. He yelped, jumping back, slipping on the wet linoleum. I looked at him, dripping and shocked. I thought maybe your family was too poor to afford a mirror, I said, my voice dripping with sarcastic sweetness. So I kindly brought you a bucket of water to reflect on your true self. The dam broke then. All the frustration, the condescension, the months of being pigeonholed and dismissed, came pouring out in a torrent of words. Why can't I fall for him quickly? Do I need to wear black and mourn you for a year before I'm allowed to be happy? He's better looking, he's loyal, he's smarter, he's 1,000 times the man you are. Should I have spent my nights writing sad poetry instead of moving on with someone who actually values me? Justin stood there, water dripping from his chin, his face pale with shock and a dawning, humiliated fury. His lips pressed into a thin white line. Just because of that 3-minute kiss, he finally ground out, you're throwing me away so quickly. Is that fair? I took a deep, steadying breath. He was speaking a different language, one where he was always the wronged party. I gave him a bright, fake smile. If you think you've been treated unfairly, Justin, feel free to sue me. He opened his mouth, but the club president chose that moment to walk in, taking in the scene. A dripping wet Justin, a livid me, a silently watching Carter, with wide eyes. What in the world? The president began, then his expression turned grave. Justin, Lila. The academic dean's office has been flooded with calls about your Facebook posts. They're calling it targeted harassment and a violation of the student code of conduct. They want to see both of you. Now. He looked at the puddle on the floor. And you might want to change your pants first. The consequences, they aren't going to be minor. Justin finally looked away from me, his face crumbling from anger into something like fear. But his eyes found mine one last time, stubborn, pleading, still convinced he had something to say. I felt nothing. I turned my back on him, walked over to the silent Carter and took his hand. Let's go, I said, and without a backward glance, I led him out of the room, away from the wreckage of the past and into the uncertain but fiercely chosen future. The walk away from the club office was silent, our footsteps echoing in the now empty hallway. My hand was still wrapped tightly around Carter's, a lifeline tethering me to the present. The adrenaline from the confrontation was fading, leaving a hollow, shaky sensation in its wake. I'd just thrown a bucket of water on my ex-boyfriend and publicly eviscerated him. The good girl was officially, irrevocably dead. I wasn't sure who had taken her place. Carter didn't speak until we pushed through the heavy doors leading to the quad. The late afternoon sun was weak, filtered through a thick blanket of gray clouds that mirrored the restless feeling in my chest. He led me not toward the dorms or his apartment, but down a winding path that ended at the quiet man-made lake on the east side of campus. It was deserted, the benches empty, the water a sheet of dull steel under the gloomy sky. We sat on a cold stone bench facing the water. The silence stretched, heavy and full of the things Justin had said. She hasn't told you she loves you yet, has she? Forced love is pointless. I know her better than you. I could feel Carter's tension beside me, a live wire humming just under his skin. He was staring straight ahead, his profile sharp and unreadable. Finally, he broke the silence, his voice low and measured. There's some truth to what he said. I turned to look at him, confused. What? That I was wary. He finally met my eyes, his gaze serious. Not that you'd go back to him. I know you wouldn't. But that he'd try to insert himself, to manipulate the situation. That's why I had the evidence ready. It wasn't just for Lila. It was a preemptive strike against any narrative he might try to spin. He looked back at the lake. So, there's some truth to the fact that I was protecting myself too. Predicting this. He gestured vaguely between us. But my main intention was to protect you from being attacked. I need you to know that. His honesty was disarming. He wasn't pretending to be a purely selfless hero. He was admitting to a complex strategic mix of motives. It made him more real, more human than any grand romantic gesture could have. I sighed, a long, weary sound that condensed in the cold air. I shifted on the bench to face him fully, then reached out and cupped his face in my hands, forcing him to look at me. His skin was cool under my palms. Carter, I said, my voice firm. You don't have to be so careful. You don't have to preemptively apologize for having human instincts. Even if your first reason was entirely selfish, which it wasn't, there's no need to apologize. I leaned closer, my thumbs stroking his cheekbones. Because I like you. And things like this, your crazy, prepared, over-the-top protectiveness, it only makes me like you more. He blinked. A few seconds passed and then a soft, incredulous chuckle escaped him. Half a year ahead of schedule. What? He shook his head slightly, a real smile touching his lips. I was prepared for it to take you half a year to like me. To really see me. To get past everything. He looked out at the artificial lake, his gaze distant. Of course, I also considered the possibility that you might never like me. But I'm an optimist at my core. I figured as long as I was good enough to you, better than anyone else, at least you wouldn't fall for someone else. His voice dropped to a near whisper, so soft I had to lean in to hear. Maybe you'd be willing to stay with me. To hear him, so often called an unfeeling machine, articulate this patient, humble hope was heartbreaking. The sadness I felt for the version of him that had loved me quietly from afar overshadowed everything else. This brilliant, controlled man had been prepared to wait in the shadows indefinitely, for a chance he didn't think would ever come. Tears welled in my eyes, hot and sudden. I couldn't stop them. I let go of his face and buried myself in his chest, wrapping my arms around his waist. He held me close, one hand coming up to cradle the back of my head, his chin resting on my hair. Carter, I mumbled, Carter's sweater, my voice thick. Are you just in love with the idea of being in love? With the chase? Now that you have me. He stroked my hair, his touch infinitely gentle. I'm in love with you, Sophia. The idea of you was just a placeholder for the real thing. I hugged him tighter. That's not right, I whispered. You should put yourself first. Never lose yourself in someone else. He laughed, then a low, warm sound that vibrated through his chest and into mine. That's just not possible. He pulled back slightly, tilting my chin up so I had to look at him. His gray eyes were clear and earnest. If I could control that, I would have stopped liking you a long time ago. The unspoken part hung between us. Back when your relationship with Justin was flourishing without a crack in sight. His love had been a long, dark night with no promise of dawn. He'd loved me while I was oblivious, happy with someone who saw me as convenient. The clouds above us chose that moment to break. A single brilliant shaft of sunlight pierced the gray, painting a shimmering path across the dull water of the lake, transforming it into liquid gold. Then another beam broke through and another until the whole sky seemed to be cracking open. Carter smiled, a true, warm, unguarded smile that reached his eyes. He motioned for me to look. See. The world, which had felt so heavy and gray just moments ago, was now drenched in sudden, breathtaking light. Felt like a sign, a ridiculous, wonderful cinematic sign. I turned back to him, the last of my doubts incinerated in that golden light. From now on, I said, my voice earnest and clear, you'll have me by your side. Even if our future is uncertain, filled with a million obstacles and stupid ex-boyfriends and campus gossip. I'll still choose this path with you. Every time. And I'll do everything I can to make it work. He looked at me, his expression so full of warmth and wonder it stole my breath. Yes, he said simply. He kissed me then, under the breaking clouds and the newly bright sky. It was a kiss of promise, of partnership, of a shared future no longer left to chance or daring, but built by conscious, daily choice. Choice, however, has consequences. The fallout from Lila's video and the subsequent dean's office meeting was swift. Justin was suspended from his position as president of the Finance Society pending a full disciplinary review. Rumors swirled that he might lose his prestigious internship offer. Lila was placed on disciplinary probation for harassment. The public sympathy she'd sought had vaporized, replaced by widespread ridicule and disdain. They became campus pariahs, a matched set of disgrace. Carter and I, by contrast, were left alone. The drama had burned itself out, and we were now viewed as a stable, if unexpectedly fierce, unit. Power couple was a term I heard whispered more than once, which made me snort with laughter. We were just us. Navigating finals, sharing silent study sessions, stealing quiet moments in his apartment. It was after my last final, a soul-crushing slog of econometrics, that I followed Carter back to his place. I was buzzing with relief and exhaustion. All I wanted was to collapse on his sofa, pet Sphinx, and let my brain melt into something without numbers. I have a surprise for you, Carter said as he unlocked his door. He'd been oddly secretive all day. If it's another derivative equation, I'm jumping out the window. He smirked. Better. Sphinx was waiting just inside, weaving around our legs. But behind him, sitting primly on the rug, was another cat. A tiny, fluffy ball of orange and white fur with enormous green eyes. I froze. Carter, what is that? That, he said, bending to scoop up the little creature, who immediately began purring like a motorboat, is a friend for Sphinx. And for you. I thought you could use some uncomplicated affection. He placed the kitten in my arms. It was impossibly soft, nuzzling into the crook of my elbow. My heart, already softened by the events of the past weeks, positively melted. You got me a cat? I got us a cat, he corrected, watching my face with a satisfied expression. She's a rescue. I've had her for a week, making sure she and Sphinx got along. They're tolerating each other. As if on cue, Sphinx sauntered over and gave the kitten a slow, deliberate head bump. The kitten mewed happily. I looked from the purring ball in my arms to Carter's smiling face. This was it. This was the man beneath the legend. Thoughtful, deliberate, secretly soft. He expressed love not in grand speeches, but in rescued kittens and preemptive Facebook takedowns. I love her, I whispered, nuzzling the kitten's fur. Thank you. Her name is Phoenix, he said. Seemed appropriate. I laughed, tears stinging my eyes again. Rising from the ashes. It was perfect. We ordered takeout and ate on the floor of his living room, the two cats exploring around us. The conversation was easy, light. We were in a bubble of our own making, a peaceful island after months of chaos. As dusk fell, Carter put on a movie, some mindless action comedy. We settled on the sofa, Phoenix curled in a tiny orange loaf on my lap, Sphinx claiming Carter's. The simplicity of it was a balm. Halfway through the film, Carter paused it. He got up and went to the kitchen, returning with a bottle of something pale gold and two small glasses. Fruit wine, he explained, pouring a modest amount for each of us. To celebrate the end of finals. And everything else. I took the glass, the sweet floral scent hitting my nose. I was wary. The last time I'd had an unexpected drink in his presence had led to developments. But this felt different. Controlled. Safe. We sipped. It was delicious, light and slightly effervescent. A pleasant warmth spread through my limbs, loosening the last of the finals-induced tension. The movie resumed, but I was less interested in the screen than in the man beside me. The way his long fingers stroked Sphinx's back, the precise line of his jaw in the flickering TV light. The fruit wine, though mild, was doing its work, dissolving the last of my inhibitions. I felt bold. Happy. Carter had me sitting sideways, my legs draped over his lap. His hand rested on my calf, his thumb making absent circles. I shifted, turning to face him more fully, dislodging Phoenix, who hopped down with a disgruntled emery. You still remember everything, don't you? Huh. Carter asked, a mischievous glint in his eye as he glanced down. I was tired of being teased, of being the one always flustered by his smooth, knowing comments. The wine and the warmth gave me courage. I blinked up at him, affecting an air of pure, innocent curiosity. I remember, I said, my voice steady. I remember more than you think. The effect was instantaneous. Carter's eyes darkened, the playful glint turning into something hungrier. He laughed, a low, surprised sound, and leaned down to capture my lower lip between his teeth, giving it a gentle, punishing nip. Is that so? He switched gears then, his voice dropping into that low, complimentary rasp that never failed to unravel me. Sophia Mitchell, he murmured against my mouth. You were quite impressive that day. He drew slow, teasing circles through the fabric of my shirt. That night, in the cradle of his living room, with the city a tapestry of lights outside his windows, that night became another turning point, one I chose fully and without hesitation. And when I finally fell asleep, wrapped in his arms on the sofa that had discovered a glorious new purpose, I knew with absolute certainty that the good girl was never coming back. And I didn't miss her at all. This time I woke up in Carter's arms. I lay perfectly still, savoring the feeling. The hollow ache of waking alone was just a bad memory. This was different. This was chosen. As I lay there, listening to the soft sounds of the city waking up and Carter's steady heartbeat, I replayed our time together. The dizzying, chaotic beginning had given way to this deep, steady current. Carter, our Carter, a man of many layers, and I was only just beginning to map them. He could be more playful, more tender, more silently observant than I'd ever given him credit for. Justin's idea of romance had been public gestures, grand statements. Carter's was in the details. The remembered coffee order, the rescued kitten now snoozing in a sunbeam, the way he'd systematically dismantled a threat to my peace without ever asking for thanks. He'd said he loved me, once, in the vulnerable dark. He hadn't said it again, not in so many words. But he showed me, constantly. A soft sigh ruffled my hair. His arm tightened around me, pulling me closer against him. He nuzzled his face into the crook of my neck, his voice thick and gravelly with sleep. I love you. The words were a sleepy murmur pressed into my skin. Sophia Mitchell, I love you. My breath caught. There it was again. Not a grand declaration but a quiet, sleep-softened truth as natural as breathing. I turned in his embrace, shifting until we were face to face. His eyes were still closed, his dark lashes fanning against his cheeks. In the morning light he looked younger, softer, the sharp edges blurred by sleep and contentment. I leaned in and kissed him, a slow, gentle press of my lips to his. I know, I whispered against his mouth. His arms paused their hold for a fraction of a second, an almost imperceptible hesitation. Then he pulled me closer, tucking my head under his chin. He rumbled, a sound of pure satisfaction. He didn't ask for more. He didn't demand the words back. He just held me as if my presence was answer enough. A week passed in a contented blur. Finals were over, and the campus emptied out as students fled for winter break. I was staying in the city, having landed a last-minute, low-paid but prestigious internship at a downtown financial firm. Carter, who had an even more prestigious internship lined up at a hedge fund, was also staying. We fell into a new domestic rhythm. Mornings were a quiet tangle in his bed or on his sofa. Days were spent in separate offices downtown, texting each other cryptic messages about boring coworkers or interesting data. Evenings were for cooking experiments, his were precise and followed recipes to the gram. Mine were chaotic and spice-heavy, for watching movies with Phoenix chasing Sphinx's tail, for talking about everything and nothing. It was during one of these quiet evenings as we were walking back from picking up groceries, that the last ghost of the past tried to haunt us. We were cutting through campus, which was eerily quiet in the winter dark, when a figure stepped out from the shadow of the business school building. It was Lila. She looked worse than she had outside the library. The crying had given way to a hollow-eyed gauntness. Her once glossy hair was lank, her clothes looked slept in. She stopped directly in our path, her gaze darting between Carter and me with a feverish intensity. "Senior Reed," she said, her voice raspy. "You and Sophia, you're really together now?" It was the same question but devoid of its previous venom. Now it just sounded lost. Carter's polite but distant mask slid into place. "Is that any of your business, Lila?" She flinched at the use of her real name. I wanted to warn you. Her eyes fixed on me, but the hardness was gone, replaced by a pathetic desperation. You might not really know what kind of person she is. Don't let her fool you. It was such a tired, weak echo of her previous attack that I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The memory of her tearful, manipulative video was still too fresh. I didn't explode this time. I just felt a weary contempt. Oh, so you're the expert on me? Should I start calling you Sophia's personal plagiarist? Stealing my life to make your own seem more interesting. She flushed a mottled red, humiliation warring with her misery. Sophia. Shut up. No, you shut up, Carter said, his voice losing its polite edge. It was cold final. He looked at her not with anger but with a clinical, almost pitying disdain. Actually, I think I know you better than I knew Sophia for a long time. He tilted his head, the street lamp catching the sharp angle of his jaw. Homewrecker. Third wheel. He gave her that same chillingly polite smile. How would you like me to address you? It was the verbal coup de grace. Lila's face crumpled. The fight drained out of her completely, leaving behind a shell of a girl. She stared at us, her lips trembling, and then without another word she turned and ran, her footsteps echoing in the empty courtyard before being swallowed by the night. We stood in silence for a moment. That felt cruel, I said finally, though I couldn't muster much genuine sympathy. It was justice, Carter replied, taking my grocery bag from me. She doesn't get to rewrite history. She doesn't get to paint herself as the victim after what she tried to do to you. Some lines can't be uncrossed. He was right. Some doors once slammed shut couldn't be reopened. Lila had chosen her path, and it had led her to a cold, lonely place. I pushed her from my mind. She was part of a story I was no longer reading. The true test came from an unexpected direction. My family. My internship was demanding, but I loved it. The buzz of a real trading floor, the smell of stale coffee and ambition, the dizzying screens full of numbers that told stories of global fortunes won and lost. I was a glorified coffee fetcher and data inputter, but I was learning. I'd call my parents every Sunday gushing about the things I was seeing, the analysts I was meeting. My mom was always supportive. My dad, a pragmatic engineer, was cautiously proud. Then during one call he asked the question I'd been dreading. So, this boyfriend of yours, Carter, you've been seeing a lot of him. His tone was neutral, carefully so. Yeah, Dad. He's great. He's interning at Grayson Capital. A whistle on the other end. Grayson? That's top tier. Kid must be sharp. He is. The sharpest. Pause. I could hear the wheels turning in my practical father's mind. And his family? What do they do? I froze. In all the intensity of the past months, the subject of family had never come up with Carter. He never mentioned them. I'd assumed, like me, they were middle-class, hard-working people. But the way he carried himself, the apartment, the car, a seed of doubt sprouted. I'm not sure actually, I admitted. Another longer pause. Sophia, honey, my dad said, his voice gentle but firm. You know what we've always said. Ambition is good. Drive is good. But stability is everything. You come from solid stock. We've worked hard to give you a stable platform. Don't get dazzled by a fancy internship or a smooth talker. Make sure his foundation is as solid as his prospects. The words were a bucket of cold water. He wasn't being mean. He was being my dad. He'd seen friends' daughters get swept up by charismatic guys from flashy backgrounds, only to be left heartbroken when things got real, or worse, when they realized the glitter was just debt and pretense. His fear was my deepest, oldest fear. Financial instability, a life built on sand. I know, Dad, I said quietly. His foundation is, he's the most real person I know. But the doubt was planted. That night, over stir-fry, I tried to sound casual. So, my dad was asking about you today. Carter looked up from meticulously separating his snow peas from his peppers. Oh, should I be nervous? Only if you have a criminal record he could unearth. He was just wondering about your family. What they do. Carter's chopsticks stilled. He didn't look uncomfortable, just thoughtful, as if deciding how to structure a particularly complex data set. He set the chopsticks down. My mother is a retired concert pianist, he said, his voice even. She taught at Juilliard. My father is a cardiothoracic surgeon. He's the head of his department at New York Presbyterian. The air left my lungs. Juilliard. A department head surgeon at one of the best hospitals in the world. This wasn't upper middle class. This was wealth. Old money, achievement-based wealth. The kind that paid for apartments like his and internships at Grayson and a certainty about the world that I could only mimic through sheer effort. I must have looked as shell-shocked as I felt, because he reached across the table and took my hand. Does that change something? No, I said automatically, but my voice was thin. I didn't know. It never came up. He shrugged as if the pedigree of his family was as relevant as the weather. They're just my parents. They live their lives, I live mine. They're intense, supportive but from a distance. They expect excellence. They got it. They expect excellence. The words hung in the air. I thought of my own parents who expected hard work and honesty, who celebrated B+ as if they knew I'd tried my best. We came from different planets. Are you worried? He asked, his thumb stroking my knuckle. That I'm some trust fund brat playing at real life? Are you? The question slipped out, harsh and unvarnished. He didn't get offended. He actually smiled. The trust fund exists. It's how I paid for this apartment. It's also locked away until I'm 30 unless I use it for graduate school. My internship stipend pays for groceries and utilities. My tuition is a combination of academic scholarships and a loan I took out myself, which I'm already paying back with my internship money. He spoke like he was reading a financial statement. I believe in building my own equity. My parents' success is theirs. Mine will be mine. It was the most he'd ever said about himself. It was a blueprint of his philosophy. Controlled, independent, self-made within the framework he was given. It should have reassured me. And it did intellectually. But emotionally the gap felt wider than ever. He wasn't just Carter, my boyfriend. He was Carter Reed, heir to a legacy of pinnacle achievement, for whom excellence was the baseline. Where did a striver from Ohio, a girl who fought panic attacks before big exams, fit into that? The next few days a subtle strain existed between us. I was pulling back not consciously but because I was reassessing everything through this new daunting lens. I'd thought we were building something together from similar ground. Now I felt like I was trying to construct a shed next to a skyscraper he'd already inherited the blueprints for. He noticed, of course. Carter noticed everything. He confronted me about it on a Saturday afternoon. We were supposed to go to a museum exhibit on algorithmic art, something he'd been excited about. I was dragging my feet, complaining of a headache. You don't have a headache, he said, standing in the doorway of his bedroom, watching me pretend to look for my shoes. You're avoiding me. I'm not. Sophia. He walked in and sat on the edge of the bed. Talk to me. Is it my parents? The money? I stopped pretending and sank down beside him. It's not the money. Not really. It's the expectation. The altitude. My dad spent his whole life building a basement so I could have a solid first floor. Your parents built a penthouse and handed you the keys to the elevator. I'm scared I'll get motion sickness on the way up. Or that you'll realize the view is better with someone who's always lived that high up. He listened quietly, his expression serious. When I finished, he took both my hands in his. You think I care about penthouse views? He asked, his voice soft. Sophia, I grew up in a penthouse. It was quiet and cold, and every achievement was met with a nod and the immediate question, what's next? I watched my parents' marriage become an efficient merger of two brilliant careers. That's not a life. That's a well-executed project. He looked down at our joined hands. You know what I saw the first time I really noticed you? It was sophomore year. You were in the library helping that kid from our Econ 101 class. The one who always smelled like onions. Understand supply-demand curves. You were patient. You didn't look bored or superior. You were just genuinely trying to help someone else get it. You got excited when his face lit up with understanding. I remembered that kid. I'd forgotten all about it. You have a warmth, Sophia, he continued, his gray eyes earnest. A steadiness that has nothing to do with bank accounts or social strata. You build people up. You fought for your own dignity in a way that was messy and loud and real. You're the most grounded person I've ever met. You're my foundation. Not the other way around. Tears welled in my eyes. He saw me. Not the good girl, not the striver, not the daredevil rebel. He saw the core of me and he valued it above all the trappings of his world. The altitude you're talking about, he said, leaning forward to wipe a tear from my cheek with his thumb. I don't want to be up there alone. I want to build something new with you. Maybe it's a treehouse. Maybe it's a cabin by a lake. I don't care what it is as long as you're there bringing your warmth, your grit, your stubborn, wonderful heart. It was the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to me. It was a vision of a future built on us, not on inheritance or expectation. I love you, I blurted out. The words hung in the air, stark and true. I hadn't planned to say them. They just erupted from the place in my chest he'd just filled with light. Carter went completely still. His eyes searched mine, wide and vulnerable. Then a smile broke across his face, so bright and unguarded it was like seeing the sun for the first time. He pulled me into a crushing embrace, burying his face in my neck. I know, he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. He held me for a long time as if I were the most precious, stabilizing force in his universe. And in that moment I finally understood. Our foundations weren't different levels of the same building. They were different materials entirely. Mine was concrete and hard work. His was steel and ambition. But together they could build something that could withstand anything. Not a skyscraper or a basement, but a home. The test wasn't about our backgrounds. It was about whether we could see the value in what the other brought. And we'd both passed. The end.